Save it for the end when we turn the
Save
recording
it
off.
when we turn the recording off.
All right.
Okay. Welcome everyone for another session of Falcon. Now we have something really cool that we were talking about topics that are of interest in education, with technology and things that are happening in society and in our classrooms. And as we are all experiencing, AI came to mind, and I told the group, uh, we have to get Derek. Derek has been doing a lot of things. I think the first time I met you in Cubes, in a Cubes working group or faculty mentoring network, you were thinking about AI, and that was before this explosion of different tools and things happened. And before you were at your current institution. So Derek is now a lecturer in the Center for Statistics and Machine Learning in Princeton and does some really neat things with uh, computational tools, but also in the classroom and thinking about AI and ethics and use. And I thought it would be fantastic for Derek to teach us what are you doing and what are you thinking about now. So welcome and thank you for taking Friday afternoon to join this crew of fun people.
Yes. Thank you, Carlos. Thank you all for the warm invite. It also helps me to have these conversations because one of the reasons I joined up with Cubes in the first place is that I taught statistics as Carlos implied, at a HSI, and still need to know, like, hey, what do biology and other professors want me to actually cover in the class for the students? And we, of course, chatted about that, and we will focus more on the AI here. I am curious about folks in the audience. I do have a quick icebreaker. I'll type it into the chat. And if you want to answer in the chat, go for it. It's the same icebreaker that I use with my students, with a minor change. Name, institution, and what is your unique goal? That's the one I like to run with. Tell me something about yourself, something that you're striving for that makes you you. And then I tell my students, please choose a goal that's different from getting good grades. That's a decent goal, but it's boring as heck. So we'll go ahead, give a couple minutes for people to type into chat while I also uh, recall how to share my screen. Oh, some great answers here. Current classes, new research, work-life balance, just kind of a bit on the nose there. Embrace AI, really? We'll see about that. Reading 3 books a month, helping students love science. That's really the foundation why we're here, isn't it? Okay, awesome. And as we proceed, as usual, if you have any questions, feel free to speak up and interrupt me. I also have, as you could tell by my head movement, multiple screens, so I could see the chat as well. But at the moment, can you see my screen? Great. The way I teach in the R programming universe, these are called Quarto Markdown blog posts. I don't actually make conventional slides. Instead, I actually make a separate web page or blog post for every single lecture I do. And part of the main reason for that is if I'm introducing computer code to students, I don't like to be restricted by literal rectangles of space. And also, this helps me communicate with the students a little bit in accessibility because one, the blog posts are available to them whenever, but also just during class itself, if I'm going too fast or too slow for them, they could just immediately jump back to whatever bit of material they missed. One of the features of the blog post, if you have it pulled up on your screen, is that there's a table of contents on the right side, and people could just flip through it, which is a bit easier than going through individual slides. Anywho, thank you once again to Miss Falcon for inviting me to lead a talk today, and we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. And the angle that I initially had intended to talk about is statements from the instructor's side of view on the use of artificial intelligence in the classroom. But then, as you can see, by the goals and objectives that we all like, will be a bit more broad than that. We will update the educator community about current trends in artificial intelligence. And what I intend to do in this talk is to recap generative AI, ponder AI resilience, draft syllabi statements, and hopefully answer some concerns from the audience as well. A little bit about me, bachelor's at UC Berkeley, master's at Long Beach State, always majored in applied mathematics, but at some point I took a bunch of online classes in data science, literally became the data science guy at UC Merced, and then as I was vamping earlier, networked through cubes to try to figure out like what do biology people want to learn and such. On the side, I care about pedagogy, geospatial analyses, which are maps, and I got to teach sports statistics for a couple of semesters as well. Fortunately, I was able to bounce and move over to the East Coast, and I now teach at Princeton, where I have a couple of courses. One's at the sophomore level, one's at the junior level, data science and machine learning, respectively. Just to give you a sense of the teaching conditions, the sophomore level classes for us a large lecture class, 160 students in total, and a junior level class, a medium-sized class of about 60 students. Uh, for the sake of time, I'll just breeze through the list of topics there. But in particular, there on the bottom right, you can see that I do talk about large language models in class. Personally, I'm not a big fan of definitions, especially in my areas of work, because to me, things like statistics, probability, machine learning, data science, artificial intelligence, foundation models, etc., to me, they're a lot of the same thing. There's so much overlap that I myself don't necessarily distinguish between them. But nevertheless, for a talk like this, it's probably good to have a starting point. Let me zoom in a bit. Oops. Okay. Another reason I don't use slides is actually easier for me to zoom in and out on the website. Statistics. These are models that express probabilistic approaches. From there, machine learning, algorithms that modify the models and parameters, such as getting the coefficients on your linear regression models. Artificial intelligence for our purposes reshape models and hyperparameters. There are advanced models out there, such as neural networks. Of course, this has been going on for many decades now, and part of the reason why we are here is to talk about the elephant in the room, which is generative AI. In particular, these are artificial intelligence methods that produce novel text, images, sound, or video from training data. One of the reasons I was a bit surprised to be invited to this group is that I have different credentials than other people. So, hashtag imposter syndrome. And I did want to just try to come at this from another angle. My credentials is that when I got to Princeton, I realized that a lot of my colleagues were doing state-of-the-art work in artificial intelligence, and I had to catch up really quickly. So over the past 3 years, I read over 20 books about artificial intelligence, as Melanie could ascribe to and how much I brag about that. And what I'm doing this session is bringing you some of the tidbits from those books of things that might be of interest to you. So with that said, just some a little bit of history here. Oh, you know that the machine learning, etc. folks like to play games like chess. In 1990, this quote that was credited to mathematician Alexandra Kronrod, chess is the Drosophila of AI. So I thought that would relate to this crowd here, is that it was an ubiquitous goal to get computer programs to solve chess because it was a common language to talk about with the research scientists. And you probably have heard where this headed, that Deep Blue was able to beat Kasparov in the late 90s. And then a couple decades later, AlphaGo was able to defeat Lee Sedol in a game of Go. So this was kind of a fun thought. We have these computer science folks trying to solve ancient games, so that way we could say that on that level we had some intelligence going on. But for a lot of us, we didn't have to worry about AI because unless, of course, you were a competitive chess player, this wasn't really affecting you. Part of the issue is the progression. And those images I showed before, notice the timestamps. June 2022, DALL-E was a generative AI program that got some headway in the social media spaces at the least. But the images on the left were simultaneously decent and able to go from the text. It's very small on the screen, but the prompt was Notre Dame coach Charlie Weiss eating cheeseburgers. Go from the text to generate images that you could recognize as celebrity eating cheeseburgers. But at the same time, of course, AI critics would quickly point out that the image qualities were very limited and not that useful. But notice the timestamp on the right. Just 1 year later, with technologies such as Stable Diffusion and Midjourney, we were able to make much better images. And I always bring these two images up to any skeptics in the room that, oh, you heard a story that AI cannot count the number of R's in strawberry, or AI cannot properly tell you a report about meiosis or something. I just want to remind you how fast the technology is coming in. And these are images. Keep in mind that technology is also working pretty quickly in fields such as text, research, sound, video, etc. Another story that I thought you would like, there is a recent book called Empire AI talking about the notorious company OpenAI, makers of ChatGPT. There in the top right, there is a parable in June of 2022. The team wanted to get funding from Bill Gates and Microsoft. And Bill Gates told the team that he would only start paying attention to the OpenAI folks if GPT-4 scored a 5 on the AP biology test. And the reason being was because Gates felt that AP Bio tested critical scientific thinking rather than a memorization of facts. And also, Gates kind of did this to hopefully give the other Silicon Valley um, aspirants busy work. He was just like, okay, good. I will just shut them up for a while. I'll just go back to working on malaria. 2 months later, OpenAI came back. They built a system uh, scored by an independent grader, scored an 8.5 on the AP bio test 2 months later. And then that's when Gates upheld his promise and said, okay, I'll invest millions of dollars into this. All right, so these then, of course, started to affect our lives. GPT 3, 3.5, and 4 came out, and that affected us as educators. There have been many people, or over the years, asking others, do we have a remedy for this, and what are we contending with? So once again, going back to the book AI Con, Turnitin, one of the most popular plagiarism detection systems um, that you've probably seen in Canvas, etc., released an AI detection tool that they argue was highly accurate, so accurate that it has a 1% false positive rate. But when we talk about what's called promotion material, the AI boomer stance, there are a lot of people out there that want to see AI succeed. Oh, I should have mentioned this at the beginning. Because I do work with a lot of people who are working on I will fully disclose that I myself have a vested interest in seeing AI succeed. And I'm coming at you today as kind of the tech bro and talking to you again now here in the education community. Anywho, bottom right quote, OpenAI, again, makers of ChatGPT, itself has admitted in a blog post geared towards educators that AI detectors don't work, or these are not reliable enough to be used by educators to accuse students of using the tools. Quick side note, I would like to think I left that typo in there to prove that AI did not type that. Anywho, um, so you have these different companies, each with their motivations. Turnitin will claim that they're good at checking plagiarism. OpenAI will tell you that no, there does not exist a possibility of a plagiarism detector. Both of them highly motivated to say such things. But we in this community have, of course, seen many reports that unfortunately the plagiarism or other AI detectors do have very high false positive rates, meaning that it is very likely you would accuse a decent, upstanding student of cheating. And unfortunately, I don't really have much to alleviate concerns in that arena. All right, so what I'd like to do in my classes, etc., is every once in a while pause for questions, and we'll do that now. If does anybody have any questions so far?
Yes. So turning in is bad. What do you think? How well do you think humans can detect AI generated text?
For a fun example, yesterday was the so-called opening day of Major League Baseball, and they thought they could get away with using AI text and then just said on the newscast. And they were talking about a game that took place between the Los Angeles Angels and the Houston Astros. But it was obvious that AI had scraped a lot of fan conversations about the teams, and you just happen to know the story about the 2017 Astros. The newscast called them the trash tros because they scanned AI. And this is a roundabout way of me saying someone approved at the news station that it was okay to just have the robot read off the script. And they knew it was AI and it was still bad. So that's one way to think about it. I'm not a big fan of the syntactical, maybe because I myself use a lot of hyphens and M dashes myself, but that is a conversation that's been going on with the creative writing folks and others in the humanities, etc. That it's the issue is that we need to be able to have good relationships with our students to know what their writing style is. And then with that said, we could trust that it's going to be different from AI if we know how the student writes in the first place.
Hmm.
Other questions? What's been on your mind? And I think I spy one of my coworkers in the audience. I forgot to brag about this to my coworkers, but thank you for being here.
Hey, Derek. This is Stacy.
Hey, hey.
So those of us that teach intro bio are always going to say, how do we add in something that we know is important for them in their future for use in science, but not, go through the ethics of how about, like you were just saying, somebody's approving the use of AI in a media report or something like that. It doesn't seem like there's very many ethical boundaries out there anymore. But do you have suggestions for it like that? How do you talk to students about that balance between its use in research versus use in summarizing?
So at least for my machine learning classes, I do have the students, and I explicitly tell them to use AI to do literature searches. And long story short, this stems from a BioQuest fall working group where we literally shared AI tools for teaching purposes. And one of the good repositories was there are great tools out there for conducting the literature search, as in finding articles, then finding a whole network of articles. To address Stacy's question, like you all have thought about already, you want a system where you are verifying the sources. So at the least, at the minimum, what I do is then ask each student to provide a one paragraph summary of the articles they found. And that could also be done by AI. But at that level, if the source was fake, then the summary would also be fake as well. So it gives us a quick check to verify the validity of the sources that they are using and bringing into our learning environment. All right, let me switch things up a bit. The good folks here, I believe, have set up some breakout rooms so that way we could talk to each other. We'll think, pair, share a bit, and I'll put this question in chat. So that way, if maybe you don't necessarily want to share out loud, but want to talk it over for a few minutes, well, what have been some of your concerns about generative AI and the progression of technology and how that's affected educators and students? So what do you think? Maybe breakout rooms for 5 minutes or so?
And how many people per breakout room?
Ooh, we do have several here. Maybe 5 people per room.
Okay, and we'll do 5 minutes. Okay. Let me do. Open the rooms.
Do you not have the power?
I think I have the power. I
Good.
think the rooms are. Ooh, did I? Yes.
People are disappearing, so I hope that's
People are disappearing, so I hope that's okay.
That's all right. Welcome back, folks. Think, pair, and now share. If even if you don't want to share what you thought about, feel free to share something that your colleagues said. Do we have a couple of volunteers to answer the question from the breakout room?
I'll go. We were mainly talking about homework being an issue now, although all of us were in science STEM fields. It's a little bit easier to control the homework, or maybe make homework to be a smaller part of the grading. It is an issue because they do very well on the homework, but when it comes to exams and in-class discussions, that can be an issue. We were not totally against AI, use of AI. One of the participants talked about how he allows them to use AI to finish up the reports of his capstone design class. So that's a good thing. Or do literature search on that.
Awesome. Thank you for the contribution. Do we have one more volunteer, perhaps?
I can go. We in Argus talked a lot about just concerns about the impacts of these practices, like years down the line of if they're using these to outsource their critical thinking, how does that really have echoes through the rest of their education and career?
Awesome. Thank you for those contributions. As I was telling someone before the seminar, unfortunately, I don't have any super optimistic answers. Maybe not quite my goal. Um, yeah, at first, was the generative AI. Obviously, what made the press and the social media spaces was the generation of stories and images and now video. But we in the scientific communities have also been affected because if we have a bunch of low stakes assignments that are factual based and we could have students quickly look up facts or solve equations, etc., that of course is affecting our previous generation of designs and materials. And I agree with the second point about the cognition levels and how that's affecting the critical thinking skills. Just this semester, uh, I was talking to some students, and it seems like the students that are using what's called AI as a coach or AI as a tutor, those are the ones that are actually doing perhaps a little worse. But keep in mind, it's also the sampling bias that these are the students that are talking to me during office hours as well. All right, please keep those thoughts in mind. I probably should keep proceeding here. Let's go ahead and go through some syllabi statements. I'll read these off pretty quickly. Quick disclosure, I probably should have gotten syllabi statements from many universities. I did not. They all come from the Broad Center for Teaching at some place called Princeton University. Example one, all assignments and drafts you submit for this course must be your own work and not generated by AI. According to regulations, you may use AI for background research, but not content generation. And you may not use AI tools to summarize course readings or to edit your prose. In short, when my colleagues and I in a fall working group were looking over syllabi and example statements, we thought that some syllabi statements were strict and some were permissive. This would probably be an example of a strict syllabi statement as far as treatment of AI. For those who are Corto enthusiasts, these are called call-out boxes, which are collapsible. Example two, intellectual honesty is vital to an academic community. For my fair evaluation of your work, all work submitted in this course, including drafts, must be your own. Completed in accordance to university rules, which stipulates representing generative AI as your own work is a violation of resources. So again, slightly strict, but maybe a little reworded, and acknowledging that you do have generative AI, and that is the issue. The first example also did the same thing. So once again, our concern is the generative nature of the artificial intelligence tools. Example three, you may make use of AI tools under limited circumstances. For example, checking for errors and debugging codes. Please disclose the use. Oh, by the way, this course will also have timed in-class exams that you will need to complete without AI assistance. And once again, we will point you towards rules and regulations. This one is a bit more permissive, and you could tell this is for a computer programming course, at least at my university. Concerns about AI usage and what constitutes academic honesty has been very much focused on the computer programming courses. And we literally doubled the number of staff that has to handle these issues at our university. And that's really been very pervasive in those majors. I probably should not have said that on the recording, but oh well. And then finally, one more. This course makes use of Bots++, an AI-powered chatbot that has been trained on our course materials and can answer questions about course concepts and so forth. Your interaction with this chatbot is the only permissible use of AI in this course, and some other language there. So places like the Wharton School of Business and several other universities, what they're doing as a compromise is saying that the professor or the team will make the AI chatbot. Say, for example, I have a set of lecture notes for each one of my lectures. I will train the chatbot on this and maybe some open source textbooks, and students could ask the chatbot questions. The appeal for students is that they don't have to go to office hours at certain times. They could ask the chatbot questions at any hour during the day. And the appeal for instructors is that they can control what information is available to the students in that setting. So once again, this is a pretty permissive system. It allows AI, but you have to do a lot of setup in advance. And of course, this could also matter upon if you are working at an institution that will give you support in putting a program like Bots++, which in this case works in Canvas. And if there are any questions on those matters, feel free to type them into chat. But where I thought we would go next is I wanted to point out the student angle on this. So when I asked my students to rank the following concerns about data and AI from most important to least important, this is what they came up with. Privacy, authenticity, namely, is AI going to give you the right answer? Safety, regulation, and economics. Just a quick disclosure, keep in mind that the way this worked out was based on the phrasing of how I gave them the question. That is to say, I'm pretty sure the students do care about things like economics and the environment. It just happened to be the lowest ranked here because of the way I phrased the question. Of importance, I do find that this generation of college students do care about data privacy and the like, and I want to assure students that I hear their concerns. A question in the Zoom chat is how long does it take to create a class bot? I would probably put that on the order of about 2 months, as in just 2 months of email back and forth, image trivia, testing out the program. So it might be something that you could get running over the summer before a term starts. At least for this class, I had also asked them the question, do you even want for there be an AI chatbot in Canvas? And I think it was like 60-40 that they said yes, but it was a very slight majority. So with that said, privacy is the main concern. And what I wanted to bring to you here is with all that in mind, how I've been doing my syllabi statements in my courses. Again, I to state the obvious, this is still a work in progress, a draft, so to speak, not meant to be a whatever. I have it split into two segments, generative AI usage by students and by instructors. So for students, my general guidance is that you're allowed to use AI tools to coach on broad concepts, but you may not have software answer your homework or project task directly. May not upload data sets, exercise questions, data visualization, or model results into the chatbots. And from there, what I did to try to be a bit more clear what I meant by that is to actually give examples. Permitted discourse includes, how do I make a bar chart in R and ggplot? Great. I don't expect you to memorize that. Feel free to look that up. Can you help me understand the concept of heteroskedasticity? Perfectly reasonable question. Virtually no teacher explains it well. Please look it up. For exam preparation, create some multiple choice questions about confidence intervals. You know what? If you want to try to use a chatbot to try to anticipate and game the system to try to figure out how I write a test, go for it. It actually saves me time and energy during office hours. Prohibited discourse includes use this data set to give me a summary statistics of the columns. As you probably figured by now, in chatbots, it's more than just text. You can upload an image. So a second bullet point, summarize this graph and give me advice on how to improve that. That's perfectly possible with the current generation of AI, but not allowed in my course because that's what I'm teaching them. And then what we're doing here towards the end of the semester, again, an example of prohibited discourse. From the model results, how do we describe the null hypothesis? Because again, that's what I want them to deeply understand. As you pointed out earlier, if we are offloading this critical thinking, then we're losing that in the education process. But with that said, I wanted to be honest with my students that um, just because I'm telling them what to do and not do, I'm going to also hold myself to a standard as well. So generative AI from instructors. Here I disclose how the teaching staff may use AI tools over the semester. Responses for during class prompts, quicker questions, will be summarized through an AI technique called topic modeling. That is to say, if I ask a class a question and I get 160 responses, I may use AI to summarize it into just maybe about 5 different groups. So then that way I could bring it back to the next class and talk about their responses without having to go through all 160 responses. This one's pretty straightforward for universities that have grade scope. Submissions are collected and grouped by similar responses and handwriting to speed up grading. That's, again, grade scope. Of the more advanced technology, instructors use open source foundation models offline to ensure student work will not be disseminated to the wider internet nor used to train future foundation models. I'm assuring my students that I care about their privacy. And then finally, my courses tend to be project-based, and I do have to design them myself. Project data scenarios may be explored through literature searches to see how other researchers approach their data. All right. Initially, I did have a think, pair, share here. I don't think we're going to have time for that. So let me just pause for a minute just to say it out loud, give you time to think. How have you been refining your syllabi to address the presence of generative AI? We will pause here for a minute. If anybody wants to share in chat, go for it. And also, if anybody just has any general questions, feel free.
Hey, Derek, this is Stacy again. We were talking in our small breakout rooms about how much students value what I call in my class productive friction. Are you seeing that when you talk to students about critical thinking, that they agree productive friction is a good thing for them to go through?
I'm not sure if this is in the same realm of what you've been talking about, but we at my university have been talking amongst various instructors, and we have all different grading schemes, all different disseminations of assignments. The issue is that if you have too many assignments and an assignment's worth, say, just like 1% of your grade, that actually gives motivation to students to use AI to complete the assignment if it's busy work or they feel that it's less valued. So that is a concern that we are looking at the moment, indeed. Some good examples of AI usage by instructors in the Zoom chat. All right, so let me go ahead and dive into the last third of my session here. I'm surprised at myself because I thought I had made too few slides because you know how things go. This one's called Quo Vadimus, in case anybody knows that reference. Basically, what I want to do now is to update you all, just in case you haven't been as absorbed in AI as I have, and reading, 20 books or so, and just give you a few bits of terminology to take home. The first one is basically where are we now? The AI community has pretty much exhausted the internet. They have trained on a lot of text They're trained on a lot of video, they're trained on a lot of audio, and now that Silicon Valley, etc., are just looking for the next problem to solve. The current trend in AI is called agentic AI, having an agent work for you. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, my way of explaining this to people is as if you have a fully fledged librarian helping you write an essay. This creates the feedback loop that you value in your writing classes, for example. And this addresses concerns that you had in earlier versions of AI. With a feedback loop, you can have AI verify sources for you. You can have a feedback loop that will refine writing. And some of you have already been doing that. Like, oh, here I have a draft email. Can you help me rewrite this email so that it sounds less mean or terse, for example? Third bullet point, as someone mentioned earlier, if you have a student turn in a report, you have suspicions of AI just because of how disconnected or fractional it is. But with agentic AI that has a feedback loop, you can have the AI strengthen the connection between paragraphs and make sure it refers to things like figures and tables properly. And then finally, the last bullet point, what I'm thinking of doing after the semester ends is at my university, every undergraduate has to make an undergraduate thesis. I want to see if this agentic AI setup can write a whole 50-page essay that's maybe at a B plus level in about 2 hours. And that's what we're looking at right now. All right, that was a bit of a negative. Let me give you a little bit of optimism before we head out. AI resilience. My advice for AI resilience is simply, and what we mean by that is adapting to the ever-changing tech is to simply continue what you've been doing. As you probably imagine, you want to build value for your course and what happens in your course. So please continue with the flipped classrooms, continue with the alternative grading, and continue with the universal design for learning. And then finally, one more note about some terminology that came from all those books that I read. I briefly hinted at it earlier. There are two schools of thought in the communications about artificial intelligence, the AI doomers who grew up with movies such as The Matrix and The Terminator and feel that we're going in that direction, and the AI boomers who are pulling billions of dollars in capital ventures and such, who are trying to tell everyone that AI is the wave of the future. And my advice to you is the obvious, just please don't be either of them. Don't be a doomer, don't be a boomer. And that will bring us to the end of my session. If you want to reach out and ask me questions later, please feel free to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Derek. And great questions and comments, class bots, agentic AI. What questions does the group have? We still have time for questions. And
Yeah,
feel
don't make
free.
Stacy bug me again. Stacy could bug me anytime.
Stacy, more.
Well, so there was Einstein AI that was created to poke the discussion a little bit. That it worked with Canvas supposedly and was going to be agentic and have the ability to sign on and do all the students' homework for them. And so has that poked the conversation? Has it moved anybody to have conversations on campus about that?
Remind us what Einstein AI is.
I just brought it up. I'll put it in the chat. It made big news for about a week. And then they closed down. It was going to be free for everybody, and then they went to a fee model, which was, also pointing out, I think it was all part of a big, long rollout of this as a discussion point. But there is some economic disparity or an inequity on who can pay for. I don't pay for any AI, and I use it pretty sparingly. But if you can't afford to pay for it, are you getting a better quality result and something that your instructors can't see?
Yes, and you could detect that with the current students if they're using Anthropic Quad with Sonnet, then that's the middle of the road. But if they paid for AI and using Opus, that's basically having a much smarter tutor at your side, and that's definitely of concern. A question in the chat was about stages. Uh, One of the AI checks that some people have been doing is to have students also turn in their history of editing on Google Docs. And one of my concerns about agentic AI is that if you have AI helping you edit a report or essay, is that that could happen as well. And I'm wondering what will happen when we have a student who turns in their Google Doc history and realize that all the changes took place in, say, just a 10-minute time frame. What would happen then? That's my open question. But also on a more optimistic note, I too have been looking into alternative grading and see if we could have a progression to emphasize that we want to grade the students on their growth and their thought rather than the final formative whatever that we have in our process. Ungrading would be amazing. Yeah. Yeah, currently my university is doing a book club on the alternative grading book, Grading for Growth by Quark and Talbert, and that's been a fun read. Another question in chat, maybe not the next use of AI, but there have been some programs out there that have been advertising or using student advertisement on Instagram, etc. Hey, students, you want to just fall asleep in class and just have your phone take all the notes for you? It's now possible. Here you are. And that's what is possible. And hopefully your classes are a bit more resilient than that. But then it also just comes into question, like, should you have a class where it's paramount to take pages of notes in the first place?
And what do you think instructors will do with AI next?
Yeah, we've seen some instructors make a bunch of slides. Some instructors will use AI to make their syllabus and such. I've been a little guilty of that myself. But it does concern me that uh, maybe not necessarily folks in this room, but there are some people elsewhere in the country that have workloads of 6 classes per semester, and they are under a lot of pressure to produce courses, especially if the enrollments are changing and the demand for majors are changing. There will be pressure for professors to use AI to generate whole entire sessions and courses for them. So maybe we'll be on the lookout for that as well. And as said in the chat, you could use AI to make exam questions, assuming that the AI was able to scrape the questions from some other professor's materials and that was uploaded somewhere. And you see at least maybe at the primary school level where high school, middle school, elementary school teachers are sharing materials with each other. But part of the reason why they're behind paywalls is because they don't want AI to scrape their materials. AI feedback on assignments. Hmm. I guess I just haven't really looked much into it already, and partly because I'm asking my students to use AI along the way before they turn something in. So that's part of what we've been doing. I just haven't used AI feedback for assignments. And part of it's because I'm at a university where we do have a decent amount of teaching assistants and tutors where I would rather have students go to them for feedback. But before I forget, I know some of you are made the time. I just want to thank you all for being here. And if you need to go, it was good to see you.